Yeah, thank you so much everyone for joining us. We're gonna crack on with it. I'm joined with Willem, who is our Tucker's Meadow patch manager. That's one of our Bath locations. We've got Charlie, who is our Avon Views patch manager. That's another one of our Bath locations. Then we've got the lovely Jazz, who helps run and manage our Bristol location. And we've got Nat, who is our lovely Nottingham patch manager. So welcome, gang. Thank you so much for being up for this. And I'm just super excited to take everyone through what we've collectively put together and put it to a test and see whether we can create beginner-friendly things that are going to give people confidence. And I'm sure we will have done. So what we're going to be taking everyone through today is we're going to start with a bit of where to begin with planning. What's the first things that you should ask yourself, and then where should your thinking go after that? We're going to cover a few sort of bits of terminology that we think are really useful to have explained to you during that session. Stuff that we wish someone had explained to us in pretty layman terms when we first started out. Then we're going to go through the seasons. It's really important to understand what each season does for us and what we can achieve as a grower out of it. Then we're going to look at different growing conditions. So we're sort of honing in on the way that you sow seeds and raise seedlings. We're going to explain the two different types of approach, and we're going to sort of help you navigate to find which one best suits your needs, because everyone has different needs when it comes to growing. So we're going to try and go, well, if you don't have this, then we can help you with this. Then we're going to talk a bit about rotating crops and whether as a beginner it's something you need to think about in detail. And then we're going to go on to additional growing aids and pest control. So what are the structures on your patch that are going to help you get the best harvest? And how can you encourage natural pest control on your patch? And then we're going to finish on the most exciting part, which is the 101s, the essential of patch maintenance. What are the things that you as a beginner grower should be putting your time into on a weekly or bi-weekly basis to not let your growing experience become a feeling of overwhelmed, so you can enjoy the journey that you're on. It's a really creative, amazing skill to learn. So we want to help you avoid feeling overwhelmed, and we want your patch to become your paradise and not a pain in your life. Then if we've got time, we'll do some Q&As at the end. So yeah, let's get going. So yeah, Charlie, you take us away, man.
Hey there. Yeah, so it's quite a basic one just to get started. And it might sound silly to some people, but it's really, really important to just grow what you like to eat in the first year. There's all these really exciting, obscure vegetables out there that you can get into growing. But in the first year, it's always worth just sort of keeping it simple, sticking to things you like, things like, simple things that you can also store as well can be handy. So potatoes, if you get a glut, you can just stick them in a bag and they'll last for a long time. Things like lettuce, stuff that's really simple and really easy to deal with in the kitchen as well. There's lots, yeah. You can grow all sorts of things, but it's a whole nother thing learning to cook them as well. So if you've got kids, just keep it really simple. Things like carrots, they're great. Yeah, I think that's probably all for that.
Great. Grow what you eat. Simple advice. That being said, I have had parents come up to me and say, my kid's never eaten lettuce before. We've grown it, and now my kid eats lettuce. So, but it's a brilliant place to start from. And I think when we think about things that we want to grow, we need to think about different types of plants. Now, there's another one to put in this mix, but we're just ignoring it for now. It's called biennials. Let's keep it real simple. Let's just look at plants as two different classifications. And I think, yeah, Jazzy, you're going to tell us a bit about that, aren't you?
Yeah, it's really important to know this terminology because all these words get thrown at you and you don't actually know what they mean for ages. But generally, most of your veg are annuals, your seasonal veg, things that survive for a year. And it's kind of about when they seed. They'll go for a year and then they'll go to seed once you're finished. And then they drop that seed and they regrow from seed every year. Whereas annuals are your hardier things, your woodier things, your herbs and stuff, and they'll keep going year on year. There are biennials as well, which we're not talking about, but that just means they seed in the second year and then they do die as well. But it's really interesting to think about perennial veg. Is most of our veg is annual and you'll be planting it from seed, but you can get loads of really funky perennial varieties of like kale and thing that means you don't have to do that resowing every single year. So it's an interesting thing to research.
Lazy gardening, isn't it?
Yeah,
If you just want to chuck loads of perennials in your patch, then
I'm
you
so
just become a
for
weed,
just
right?
like something that you can just leave in the ground year on year. Makes
So,
life
I mean, some
easy.
of my favorites from that list are definitely like rhubarb. I love rhubarb. Jerusalem artichokes, you put them in your patch once, you'll really struggle to get them out. Perennial kale, I've got a cutting of Charles's Taunton Dean, which Taunton Dean kale is the variety that is in the picture. Apparently, they can grow up to 12 years. It's really weird because I started using it as a sacrificial plant and I grow it without any netting on, but actually the slugs and the pigeons don't touch it and it tastes just like kale. So it's a big win-win and they can grow like up to 4 feet tall. But yeah, like perennials are a really good way to hack your way into growing and not feel overwhelmed, not feel like you have to continually sow things, because that can feel like a bit of pressure. But we will send around this presentation afterwards so people can like take these slides away. If you want to go off and find some of these different vegetables, plants that we're suggesting, then all this information will be here for you. Additionally, if you want to take a little picture during the session and like pop it on social media, give us a little tag. If any of the information is like really helpful to you, then please feel free to do that. But yeah, thank you so much, Jazzy. Um, we're gonna just take you through some of our. This is how we do it. If it's really easy, and this is some watch outs. I can't quite remember who's going to take the easy to plant for harvest section.
Yeah, so I was going to touch on it, and the thing that I was really just going to reiterate was the things that we're talking about easy to plant for a harvest. A lot of them, as you might see out there, are actually perennial plants, and as you know, a lot for the reasons we did mention, like they're rigorous, they're hardy, they require little maintenance, and to be honest, for starters as well, like having perennial plants that consistently crop. They also help instill that sort of no dig principle of like minimal soil disturbance because you're not faffing around with it too much. Also on this list as well, we've got a few plants that definitely reiterate like permaculture principles. Again, like promoting that just general sustainability of your patch and good soil health.
Cool.
And a lot of them are, to be honest, quite good fun.
Gosh, and like this, so this list, if people can see my cursor on the screen sharing, the reason why we've called it easy to plant for a harvest is because it is just a whole list that you could go as a beginner. I'm just going to pop to my local nursery. I'm going to pick up these things from them. I'm going to put them straight in the ground without having to sow a seed. So like Willem was saying, they're super easy. If you just want to kickstart your growing experience, maybe if you look at half your patches annuals and half your patches easy to plant things, that's a really nice ambition for us, for a beginner to get going. And
I
like,
mean, yeah, honestly, things like rhubarb and raspberry are so like if you're starting and it's day one, put them in because they will just do their thing. Like they're really good plants just to get your confidence up and just be like, wow, you can watch it grow. Rhubarb's an interesting one as well because you can put a bell on it as well. So it's you know what I mean.
also really
These
expensive in the supermarket. I was
yeah.
looking at it last rhubarb season, and I was like, wow, like for 225 grams of rhubarb, organic rhubarb, should I say, it's like £6. So like, I think this, I don't know how many grams I harvested from my patch this year, but it's been a lot. Yeah, no, really, really nice set of things that you can just get going, get in the ground. So then that brings us on to our sort of like middle column, which is a list of plants that we think these are the most easy to sow for success plants. So when we're talking about sowing for success, this is using seeds. Nat, I think you were good.
Yeah, I was going to talk about that, but shall I go back and just talk about, we were talking about what the vision is and kind of,
Yeah, go for it.
yeah, sorry, I think we skipped that bit. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about planning your plot in terms of your personal needs, your family's needs, and what it is you want to get out of it, because it's not just food that you can get out of your plot. You can get a lot of improved well-being from hanging out with nature, just putting your fingers in the soil. And I know not everybody's coming just to grow food. We're here to connect with nature and we're here to have family time. So I just think it's really worthwhile considering what has brought you to roots in the first place, and then planning your plot based on that, like having a corner for the kids to dig. I know we know dig, but kids love digging.
Mud kitchen.
But having a space on your allotment that you don't really care if it gets trashed, you don't care how the food grows. Also, I think, you know, for anybody, not just for anyone who's there to improve their mental health, but for anybody, it's nice to have a sit spot on your plot, just a corner you can relax and kind of watch the bees buzzing and the flowers grow, and just really relax. Also, I think it's nice to think about what you're planting and not just think about food, and plant things like flowers and herbs and things that are gonna make you smile. Flowers
Definitely.
make everyone smile.
I agree. I just on that point about that little area to relax. We've got a member in Tuckers Meadow at Bath, Jazzy. She's created this incredible sort of circle of lavender plants, and then in the middle of it, she's got like a chamomile lawn, and you can lay in it, and then you can like smell the lavender, the chamomile, and the bees buzz around your head, and it is just such a super sensory experience. So yeah, definitely think about how you
I
can
loved what you were saying the
increase
other
that.
day, Nat, about yield, like not necessarily growing just for like veg yield, but also for the whole different wealth of yield as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yield of the soul.
Yeah.
That's what it's
Yes.
about.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing to spend time there with your family and get your children involved, and just make your space as friendly for those people as possible.
Yeah, maybe people want to spend more time digging ponds and putting in nice benches just as much as they want to grow the veg.
Exactly.
Definitely, yeah. We've got to look at the whole area from a mini plot perspective to a whole allotment location perspective. How can we make it work for us and the natural world? It's like that's why we're putting in hedgerow, fruit orchards, insect habitats, ponds. But then you can take that thinking to a mini level on your patch, and you go, oh, maybe I'll have a little wildflower corner. Maybe I'll have a little. I've done a Belfast sink pond on mine, and it's really lovely to see lots of people putting their own little spin on it. It's yeah, it's beautiful stuff.
But also just what makes it most accessible for certain people to get down there. If you need to sit down a lot, you put yourself a bloody bench in, or you need a box to store things. You take that, because it's about making it accessible and getting you on the plot as much as you can.
Definitely.
Yeah,
definitely.
absolutely.
I think the average UK adult spends 15 minutes outside a day. So if you can double that and triple that just by using your allotment as an outdoor space, then that's amazing. Yeah, lush. I think we were going to talk about some easy things that we were going to sow that we kind of know. Yeah, you on the ground, you're going to get some success.
Yeah, I think there's a list on the presentation. We've got radish, spring onion, lettuce, spinach, beetroot, beans. I've highlighted French dwarf beans on there because they're really easy and you don't even have to create supports for them. And they're possibly one of my favorites. Mustard, chard was the first thing that I ever grew, to be honest. I'd never eaten chard before I grew chard, and then I ate a lot of it for a year. And yeah, I still love it now. But you can't really go wrong with what's on this list.
Yeah.
And globe artichokes, they might take a couple of years to produce. But yeah, once they start producing, the yield is very nice, and that's from the bees as well. The bees enjoying the flowers.
If anyone's not seen a globe artichoke flower, they are just the most beautiful things in the world.
Yeah.
So, yeah, check them out.
I think watching the bees dive in and they kind of get stuck there, like, yeah, that's nice. Yeah, a lot of the plants on this list you can sow direct, and you just then need to think about protecting them as they're coming up. But we'll talk about that later. Also, we've got a list of flowers which will tick the beautiful box. Calendula, Nigella, sunflower, and zinnia, they're all beneficial for bees, and also good companion plants for your garden as well.
Lush. Thank you so much. And then I think we've got this other box in the bottom right, which is like we wanted to call it the beginner grower watch out. Like everyone loves the idea of growing tomatoes, aubergines, chilies. They are notoriously hard to grow from seed. We recommend if you're like going to give them a go, maybe grab quite an established plant from a nursery, pop it in your patch and give it a try. But like a lot of time beginners come to us on welcome slots and we're like, what would you like to grow? And they're like, tomatoes. And we're like, okay. And then you see someone with half a patch full of tomatoes and like 2 months, 3 months later, they've all got blight. They've not harvested anything. And it's like trying to avoid the mass feeling of disappointment is really important on the growing journey. You are going to get failures. We're playing with nature. Like that's a guarantee. But like just try things. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Just a big watch out with tomatoes, aubergines, and chilies from me. That being said, I have seen them with great success across all allotment sites, all roots allotment sites, and it totally surprises me where I'm like, oh my gosh, that is a big bush of tomatoes that has grown just outdoors in the UK climate, and it looks really happy, and this person's going to get loads off it. So, give it a go, but proceed with caution and don't be upset.
Try and look for like a dwarf variety of tomatoes or a more hardier something. If you haven't got any protection for it, it really makes a difference.
Yeah. And then Christmas potatoes, I've never seen anyone get Christmas potatoes. So if anyone has a little guide on how to do it, please share it around because you'll educate us all. Like I speak to a lot of growers, a lot of people think it's a bit of a myth. So if you have succeeded with Christmas potatoes, then wicked, let us know. But I do see a lot of the time on the WhatsApp chats, people getting really excited in September. Oh, I'm going to put my Christmas potatoes, and the greenery comes up, and then they get blight because the temperatures just aren't right at that time of year. Without fleece and knowing lots of what to do, a bit of faff, you're probably going to get failure with that. So big watch out on Christmas potatoes. Give them a go if you really want to give them a go. Why not? Nothing lost, maybe everything gained. And then the next one is mint and oregano. If you're going to grow it in your patch, definitely try and grow it in a pot, something raised off the ground. These two herbs, they notoriously spread through roots and suckers. So if you do put it in your patch, it'll be really hard to get it out if you're putting it directly into the ground. So mint and oregano, pop them in a pot.
Turn into weeds pretty quickly.
And what?
Turn into weeds pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Is this a plant that I want here, or is it a weed? It's a good question. Basil, notoriously hard to sow and get right. For some reason last year I did 3 sowings of basil. They all failed, and I had a random self-seeded basil pop up in my patch, and I was like, all right, well that's worked. But it for some reason it's quite a tricky one to get going. So don't be disappointed if you got dreams of like Italy, tomato, basil sauce, all of this going on. It is quite hard to achieve and might take you a little bit of time to get really good at growing it. And then lastly on the list is just like watermelons and melons. They are possible to grow in the UK climate. Just a word of warning. They take a long time to ripen. They take a long time to grow and get big. So if you're going to get your watermelons, you want to get plug plants, much like the tomatoes and the aubergines that you might get from a nursery, and then just put something a bit established in the ground, and don't put too much emotional energy into wishing that it survives. So yeah, this is just like a list to help you navigate. Maybe if I want to start easy, then this is a nice starting place to go from. It's got lots of things that should appeal to people's appetites. And if you know you're going to be if you're time precious, then you can lean on that left-hand column more and put in some more perennials, and then maybe experiment with like a quarter to half of your patch with the annuals in the middle, and just try and make it as easy for you as possible. So what?
Well, I think a lot of those plants really, and a lot of those things to grow, they should really make you feel confident and curious. Like some of them are really good fun to watch grow. Like things like courgettes are fabulous. You know what I mean? Or like when you see sweet peas and stuff come up, like they get you excited. And when you're seeing perennials like being hardy and doing their thing, like it's fab. Like I think a lot of those plants on these lists should make you feel very confident and very curious with what you can do.
Definitely. And some of them you can share as well, like your Jerusalem artichokes. When you dig them up, you can give them to a mate. They can put it in the ground. With your perennial kale, you can take clippings of them and put them in a pot and root it and share that on. And I think growing is a lot about sharing and caring, and the more you can give to people. And then obviously when we're in the middle of the season, I've always got a little box outside my house where it's like free to a tasty home. No one ever needs more than 2 courgette plants on a roots allotment site, I don't think. But what we've basically got here, I just wanted to show people a way of how an individual bed on a starter patch could transition into from a spring planting to a summer planting. And Charles kindly gave us some of this information to share with you guys. So if we look here, this is the sort of the beginnings. This is a starter patch. It's split into 4 sections. If you're a beginner, really good idea to get your wood chip path in the middle, and then you're splitting it into 4 sections that you can sort of keep an eye on and manage. And I'm just showing you what can be done with sort of like one part right now. So we're not going, this is a full patch plan. We're just going, let's focus in on a bed and what we can achieve with a bed. And if you take it step by step, then that 1 bed can become 2 beds and that 2 beds can become 3 beds. But basically, I've got the panel hosts. Oh, there we go. They're at the top now. Brilliant. So we've got potatoes in, which is something that we give to all members. Potatoes are a really solid crop to get in around March. The big watch out with potatoes is that you want to keep on mounding up compost on top of them anytime any greenery shows before you get to your last frost date in your season. Now we'll come on to last frost dates, but mounding up potatoes is really important. It gives them organic matter to grow into, and it means that they won't get frosted. The greenery on potatoes is really, really tender and doesn't like the frost. So you've got to keep on stacking it up until you get past your last frost date. Then when you're past your last frost date, you can go for it. Let them go bananas, let them flower, and they'll be producing your potatoes. So we think potatoes is a real essential one in any patch plan. The next one on is radish. Radish is so easy to sow. It's like what we encourage everyone to sow on their welcome slots, because you know that you're coming back in a month and a half and you're going to get some sort of harvest. It's also really hard to mess up sowing radish because it is just so vigorous in its growth. The spacings that we've got here at the bottom, these are the spacings that need to be between sowings or between plantings. Now we will come on to that, the difference between putting a seed in the earth and putting a plant in the earth. But the spacings are here just so you can be aware of how much room that vegetable needs. It's really hard to visualize as a beginner. What space does that seed need that I'm putting in the ground? And with this, it sort of tells you, all right, you can visualize 25 centimeters around for a bit of spinach, about that. And then if you're thinking about anything bigger, like a cabbage or a kale or a cauliflower or a broccoli, they're going to be pretty big. So the spacings are kind of reflective of the size of the vegetable. And you just got to think about, that's how much this vegetable needs room to grow in my patch. Oh, sorry, guys. Yeah, we did. We can definitely go on to that maybe after the plan. Then we've got onions. So a nice block of onions. Onions are great to grow for storing, and they're just an all-round winner. They're pretty hardy. You can get them started a bit earlier in the season, so you could get your onions started in March. And then we've got beetroot. Beetroot, we'll come on to multi-sowing techniques, but I've just fallen in love with multi-sowing beetroots. It's one of my favorite things to do. So you can fit them in your patch, and you can fit a lot of them in. And then we've got lettuce. So lettuce, you don't need loads of plants. I'd say per starter patch, you probably want to do 3 sowings of lettuce per season max, and you probably only need about 3 to 4 lettuce plants for a family of 4. If you're doing the techniques that we're going to come on to show you, you'll have lettuce leaves coming out of your ears. But also what I've learned in the last few years is growing for the diversity in taste with salads is just the best thing to do. When I first started, I only grew lettuce, and then I discovered all the different salads that were there. Now I pick a mixed salad every week, and instead of it being like, oh, it's lettuce again, it's actually, oh, we've actually got lettuce, we've got landcress, we've got winter purslane, we've got mustard, different flavors, different textures going on, which makes the salad game a lot more interesting and exciting. And then we've got a little row of peas. Peas are a really brilliant early crop, and there's nothing like the taste of your own pea straight out the pod on your patch. None of mine really make it to the kitchen. They're just snacks for me whilst I'm gardening. And then I missed out on carrots. Carrots, always give carrots a go. Don't ever be wishful that all of your carrots are going to make it. I tried 4 sowings of carrots this year, and only 1 sowing made it through. The slugs seem to devour carrot seedling seeds super quick. But the taste of your own carrot compared to a supermarket carrot, there's nothing that compares to it. The sweetness, the flavor, the nuttiness. it's something worth trying and trying again and trying to beat our sluggy friends on. So now we're going to show how that bed could transition into a summer planting, and I've done it on the same bed, so we can just see how it goes. There we go. So we'll just flick between the two. So this is the transition between spring and summer. So there are still some of the same plants in there. But as we're coming into early summer, it's time to plant some leeks. We can go for some outdoor cucumbers. There are some really great varieties of outdoor cucumbers in the UK. The reason I'll just go back to leeks. The reason we love leeks is because you put them in the sort of the early summer, and then that is a crop that can sit with you from autumn all the way into winter. They're really, really frost hardy. So these are crops that you can take as baby leeks when they're ready during the summer, or you can leave them in the ground and take them throughout the winter. It's a super versatile crop. Then going on to the cucumber plants, you probably only need a couple of cucumber plants for the space that you've got. If you're looking at like a 1 meter strip, you could probably fit 2 cucumber plants in there. And then the next winner for me is like dwarf beans. They're a really good way of extending your harvest either side of the season. So if I was going to sow a climbing bean versus a dwarf bean on the 1st of June, which is what Charles Dowding recommends, you put your beans in the ground, direct sow them. I'm going to get a crop way quicker from my dwarf beans than I am from my climbers, because my climbers are putting in all of their energy into going up the hazel poles that I've created for a structure. Whilst at the same time, I'm going to get an absolute bounty of a harvest from the climbing beans. I want a quick harvest, so I've got maybe you can put your dwarf beans in at the base of your climbing beans, and then you'll get your first harvest of dwarf beans, and then your climbing beans will move into crazy overproductive stage. But just with your dwarf beans, you can do a late sowing in the season to then catch the tail end of the season because of that quick growth, the quick growth thing that they do, because they're not growing into a massive 8 foot, 10 foot tall vine. They're just staying as a small 1 foot bush, and it's super quick, easy crop to get going as a beginner. Next on is the kale. I think kale is a superb one to sow. I pick my kale plants. They keep on coming again all the way throughout the whole of the season. Pretty much, you can have them all the way into winter, and if the frost doesn't rot the stem out, you can get a crop into the spring. So really great way to mix it up there. Obviously, more carrots. You can sow carrots at multiple times throughout the year. And then more beetroots, because who doesn't love beetroots? I give pickled beetroots every single year as a gift. Yeah, so celery, quite an interesting one to get going as a beginner, but also give it a go if you like celery. It just loves water. And then obviously chard is an absolute stalwart of any grower's arsenal. So that chard that you put in summer, that will last hopefully all the way through winter again and provide you with a bit of harvest the next spring. So gardening is about thinking about what's coming up in the next few months, and then what can I actually get from this plant 6 months plus from now. It's awesome. So what I have done, just so people can have a little look at what you would do with maybe some other plants, I've put them in here. So this is still the summer planting, but then at the same time as when you'd be putting these in, you'd probably be putting in your courgettes. Courgettes, they take up a huge amount of space. You probably only need 2 plants per starter patch. And then we've got our squash up here. I've only put 4 plants in for 1/4 of a starter patch because they do grow and they do sprawl, and they'll eventually come over your wood chip paths, and you'll have to sort of like train them around. What I do on my patch, I grow them vertically, so I grow them up instead of on the ground. So check that video out on the members area. We've got one on there. And then to the left of it, I've got my climbing beans in the rotation as well, just because of the amount of harvest that you do get from them. I think it's amazing. I've left a creative bed on this plan. So if you're a beginner and you go, right, I'm just going to follow this one, and this one, and then you've got 1/4 of that patch just to experiment with. It could be a herb bed, it could be a mini pond, it could be that chair that we're talking about. It could be you giving a go for more successional lettuce sowings throughout the season. But yeah, it's sort of a space for you to do what you want with. I don't think we should give you a full plan because you need to have that room to experiment and be creative. And then in the bottom left, I've just done a little a fruit corner, shall we say. Like if you could make a whole quarter of your patch a fruit corner, you could have loads more strawberries, you could have loads of raspberries. Everything that we're suggesting here is scalable up and down. So do what works for you. We just want to sort of give you the inspiration to try and make the most out of your space that you've got. Lovely. Right. That's a bit about planning. I was thinking maybe here, when we're going to just talk a little bit about our favorite thing to sow, maybe what would be nice is if each of us could just have a little reflection on what your lesson of 2024 was. Like, that would be a really nice thing for us to do. Does anyone want to go first?
I don't mind.
Hey, Charlie, go on then, dude. What do you like? What's your favorite thing to sow? And give us a lesson.
So, my favorite thing to sow at the moment, this changes all the time on a weekly basis. But I've got some hollyhocks that I sowed last year that I'm really excited about growing on over the next year. And I'm a bit confused as to when I'm going to get some flowers. Might be next year, might be in 2 years, but we'll find out. And my biggest lesson of 2024, was sowing things too late and not sort of just thinking, oh, a couple of days will be fine, or a couple of weeks in some cases. And so I had a lot of tomatoes in my polytunnel and I wanted to get a little bit more harvest from them. So I waited 2 more weeks to put my salad plants in. And as a result, my salad plants were not grown in time. So I should have been harvesting salad for the past 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and probably not going to get any till March. And that's all because I just wanted to hold off for 2 more weeks of tomato harvest. So sometimes just cut your losses, basically.
Is
Get
that
on.
because the plugs? Is that because when you put the plants in the ground, they were too small to get going over winter?
It was a combination. So the plants should have been like they were sown at the right date, but because they were just went in the ground 2 weeks later, they just didn't have that chance to get their roots down that extra bit and grow. And it's just the light, the weather, the temperature, all of those things drop off so sharply at the end of the autumn. It doesn't feel like a lot, but actually in reality for a little plant, it's a big deal.
Okay, cool. Great. Who wants to go next? Nat.
Hello. Yeah, I think favorite things to grow. Can I do more than one? Beetroot is one of my favorite things to grow because it's so easy and you can multi-sow it, and then you've got so many uses for it once you harvest it. And also, I mean, I juice mine, I ferment it, roast it. But also you can eat the leaves on the beetroot when they're young and add them to your salad. So yeah, actually, if I had to pick one, I would pick beetroot.
So you're straying away from the globe artichoke.
Yeah, I've already mentioned them.
And go on, tell us what a lesson of 2024 was.
I think possibly being a little bit too sleepy on my awareness of the weather and the fact that it was a very, very mild winter last winter, and it was also very wet. And I steamed. Usually I'm in my allotment more over the winter, and I don't think I was last year, probably because it was wet. So it got growing with my growing season, and yeah, I didn't realize how many slugs were actually living in my allotment, which I think were everywhere, but they just kept coming and coming and coming. And yeah, my lesson would be to, at this time of year, really reduce habitat, really kind of check all those places where slugs are hiding. They like hanging out on large leaves, actually large perennial leaves, so it's good to check under there. Rocks, plant pots. So yeah, I will be on the case this year going forward.
No sluggy habitats over winter. All right. Let's see if it's possible. Jazz or Willem?
Yeah, I'll go because my lesson was also slugs. It was just so sluggy last year, wasn't it? Oh, so sluggy. My lesson was just to sow and sow again. I just re-sow, like my whole line would get annihilated, and I just sow again. Just with confidence, I was just banging out fresh rows of things over and over. till I eventually got a harvest. I was like, this isn't going to knock me down. They've eaten everything. I'm just going to sow it all again. Just going to keep going until I got something. That was my lesson. Just don't be defeated by the slugs.
That's a really good lesson though. It's like, you need a bit of determination to get the wins out of it and to not be disheartened by your failures. And it's
Yeah, because sometimes just everything goes wrong. You don't even know why. There's nothing you could
yeah,
have done.
yeah.
Just keep going. Don't let it take you down.
I wouldn't sow again. Love that.
Also, you put on here Romanesco and cauliflower, which isn't what I said, but Romanesco
Do you
are.
say tomato sun gold?
No, I said sweet peas just because they are
I'm
so
so sorry.
yummy. Romanescos are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. But sweet peas, just 'cause- just like to have little bunches of sweet peas to give my friends, and they smell. I did a little sweet pea tunnel as well.
Oh, I
Ooh.
can't wait to see one this year on your patch then. It's gonna be great. Willem, come on then.
Okay, right. So I was actually thinking about it because this is two now. Like snapdragons for me, they remind me of being a kid. They're great fun, really beautiful little flowers. You can turn them into little puppets. They're absolutely wicked. Do check them out. And obviously, insects love them. Also, feverfew, give it a go because like if you suffer from migraines or you're someone who, might have headaches or whatever, try growing feverfew and having it. It's really really good stuff. Could really remedy it for quite a few people. Works for me anyway. But the lesson that I probably learned really was the importance of probably seeing how damp soil is really like and to not worry too much about watering, like really check how much it's raining, being aware of it, and and being tentative and cautious around watering was a really important lesson, especially given, as we're all saying, like it was such a soggy year. So like to really really tune in with that, just being, because there are quite a few members that were watering quite a bit, and yeah, I really learned that you just don't need to worry about it half as much.
Yeah, I think that's a really great insight, to be honest with you. Especially with no dig. I think if you are digging and you're turning and you're rotivating, then there is a need to water pretty regularly throughout the year because you're destroying the soil structure and it doesn't hold it as well. But with no dig, we're finding that, wow, even if we've got 2 months of sunshine, it's still got moisture in the bed. And it's unbelievable what no dig can do for us. So a lot of
Mm.
the time as a beginner, you do make that mistake where I'm not saying you're a beginner, Willem, sorry, that wasn't intended that way. I meant my experience from
No,
my,
I mean the irony is like obviously did used to do hydroponics, so like so used to having lots of water, but like
yeah.
it's such a big dealio, isn't it?
Yeah. You're like, why are my plants yellow and floppy? And then sometimes that's a sign of underwatering. And then as a beginner, you're like, oh my gosh, I need to water them. I need to water them.
Mm.
Because you're
But
essentially doing the same thing. You're drowning them, and then they can't take up any water because they're
yeah,
Exactly so,
drowned.
exactly
no
so.
one would, no, you wouldn't like it if I left you in a bathtub for 7 days, would you? Like, you'd be pretty annoyed. Our plants are similar. Um, Lush. Right. So I think Kate's favorite was the Romanesco, and I've put these in the wrong place.
I
Uh,
thought hers were potatoes.
she changed. She changed.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
changed my mind 3 times.
And then Will Russ, so Kate and Will Russ, they're in the background. Um, Will Russ loves potatoes, the Picasso variety. I really love growing potatoes as well and excited to grow more varieties of potatoes this year. My favorite is um, is Crown Prince squash. I just think you can't go wrong with it. It's the nuttiest, creamiest, sweetest squash maybe out there. There are definitely some that might challenge it for that title. So I'm not putting a claim on
No,
that.
it's the best.
I do
But oh,
thoroughly enjoy them.
I just like a lot of time people when they're looking at squash, they peel the skin off before they do anything to it. With Crown Prince, I
Mm.
just chop it in half and put it in the oven, roast it, and then
Oh,
just
it's
blitz
fudgy,
that
isn't it?
straight
It's
into a soup.
fudgy and oh,
Yeah,
it's
it's
fantastic.
gorgeous. It's
Yeah.
gorgeous. My lesson for 2024, probably around pushing produce too far in terms of the planting out date. I tried to sow Florence fennel in September, and I had it fleeced all the way to December, and it got about that big, so I maybe could have eaten it, but then I went away on holiday for 2 weeks. We had snow, we had really, really cold temperatures, and came back and lifted up my fleece expecting to see some Florence fennel, and there's just none of them. So sometimes things work, sometimes things don't, I guess. But that's my lesson for 2024. So moving on, these are all lovely photos from our allotment sites. It was really cool to be able to actually make a slide like this where we've got a picture from our allotment sites from each season, all looking quite different and seasonal. So like as a grower, you'll become obsessed with rain, sunshine, and poo, basically. Um, but there are lots of other things to look at in a natural world, and that's how the weather changes throughout the year, the different light levels in each season. They're different. They're things to consider, and it affects the types of plants that we can grow. We need to think about first frost dates, last frost dates. And I think just as a last note on the seasons in general, before we'll do a little bit of a deep dive into each one, is don't believe what people are saying on Instagram. Try not to engage with maybe like what something's saying in America in our winter time. It's different. It's different seasons. Someone in Australia, it's different seasons. Be careful where you get your information from. And just like my biggest word of advice is in winter is don't get wrapped up in the FOMO. Like you'll see so many people sowing seeds on Instagram right now. I can confidently say I've not sown a single seed. I might sow some broad beans. Like I for me, like it's just about resting right now and putting energy into February. It's so cold, it's so wet, it's so dark outside. But yeah, the best thing is to think about the seasons. We are having changing seasons in this country. The conditions for every single year that I've been a grower, which is like I think nearly 5 years now, they've been very different nearly every single growing season. Our summers are getting what might be wetter, sometimes 6 months of heat and sunshine, and then winter's really, really wet. But this winter's felt a bit mild so far. So don't hedge your bets on one thing. If you're looking at the seasons and climate change and how to grow for success, then plant for diversity. Diversity in crops will offer you resilience across the seasons, and I think that's our biggest lesson to talk to take you through on that. But winter, we are in winter. It makes sense to start there, doesn't it, Jazz?
Yeah. Yeah, seeing as we are in winter, to think about what to do in this season. We were having a really nice chat about it and really thinking about being patient and sitting and observing and really being with your plot. This is the time of year to do planuaries. Someone used to say this amazing thing to me, don't just do something, sit there. I bloody loved it. Like this like permaculture principle of actually really considering and stopping and thinking about what you're going to do in the year ahead, really observing and knowing your plot and knowing what happens where and see where it floods and see what are the conditions you're growing in to prepare you for the year ahead. So there's those are jobs you can do that aren't just sowing seeds. It's the time of year to turn your compost and to do your compost top ups and to protect to like maintain your tools, do all the things like weed whilst your weeds are dormant, because they're not going to be growing and popping off now. But if you get out all your pernicious weeds now, you get that dandelion out of the ground now properly, it's going to make yourself life so much easier for you in the summer. Someone said a really lovely comment. What was it? Rest, relax, and dream. Take care of our roots as nature does too. I thought that was so
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah.
And what's the
Still, it's
light
like you
level
still
saying
probably
at this time of year? I mean, I'm looking outside now, it's real dark.
Yeah, but I've been out there all day, Ed. I've still got harvest. So you still probably got lots of winter harvest things coming through. You can still be planting those perennials, going and getting your fruit trees and your herbs, planting your tubers out. I'm still
Yeah,
harvesting lots of my hardier things. So in times of like thinking this is the time for hibernating, like I'm still fermenting things. I've still got beetroot coming out of the ground. I'm still preserving stuff, thinking about like your little winter season and your nourishing time. Yeah. Prep
definitely.
yourself for spring.
And are you using any fleece during this time, or are you fleeceless?
Yeah, I'm using lots of fleece
Yeah,
to protect things from the frost. Um, Which is also we like the frost. Frost makes things much tastier a lot of the time. Actually, it really boosts your vegetables and gives them those sugars. It's really good to have that snow on the ground. It can be a really protective layer, but a little bit of fleece, tiny little tunnel, can really change and protect your plants from the elements and make you grow so much more in this season.
Love that. Love that. Winter is a great time of year, and it's quite a dark time of year in this country, but we can enjoy it. And
You just got to dress for it.
if you plan ahead in the season, then I know I like you, go down my patch, get some Brussels sprouts, get some kale, get some cabbage. Like it's all there. I've even got chard coming out at the moment and beetroots, like you're saying. So yeah, there's so much availability in winter still, even though it's considered as a time when we don't really sow seeds. But yeah, if you get your planning ready in the summer, then you will have a bountiful winter.
If you've got mad seasons like you do now, you still have calendula flowering on my plot. What's that about?
That just sounds crazy, doesn't it? Really? Spring.
Cool. So spring's obviously a really exciting time. I was quite glad to get this section. We're almost there, but I think the main and sort of first thing to think about is patience. We all want to start sowing seeds like right away, but if you do start sowing them now, they're going to end up really leggy, and they're not going to give you the success that you need. Things will catch up if you sow them later, so don't be stressed out if come the end of February you still haven't put a seed in the ground. Those plantings that you plant in the start of middle of February, they're really, really slow to take, and often something you sowed a month later will actually catch up and be ready a week later. So all of those things, the light levels increasing, the temperature of the soils increasing, all those things mean that your plant is going to there's a curve of growth. It goes up and then it goes down throughout the season, and spring is where that curve is really, really sharp. So
And what are the main two
always
things that contribute towards that from like a weather perspective that our plants sort of like the light and the warmth in it. Those are the two main things to be aware of as a grower.
yeah, like we don't like doing much when it's really cold, and plants are pretty similar.
I
So
like that.
yeah, it's simple, and a good way to do it is like in the spring, get your hands in the soil and feel the temperature. Especially if you're sowing things direct, I wouldn't sow anything direct until sort of the end of March, and so that's putting things like carrots and stuff straight in the soil, which is a great way to get a harvest. But just when that soil is really cold, the seeds won't germinate. So I always wait till after Valentine's Day to start sowing things indoors. And then if we're sowing things outside, just give it another month. And always sort of one of the things I heard from someone is sort of buy the best seed compost you can afford, because that's when you have a lot of control over the plant. So if you're sowing things at home, don't, uh, cost is obviously something that's, people have different levels of what they can afford. But that I'd say is where it's worth spending that little bit of extra money to ensure you've got a good start on your seedlings. Because when you're growing things at home or in little cell trays, that's when you have the most control over the light. Well, not necessarily the light, but over the water they're getting and the nutrients they're getting. So take advantage of that and give your plants the best start, and they'll reward you months down the line with a great harvest.
You've got a couple of seed compost people. Like, where do you get your seed compost from, Charlie?
So I get my seed compost from Mall and Gold.
Yeah.
It's a really, really, really good supplier, and they're organic, and you can get it online. It's a little bit expensive, but I use the Charles Dowding module trays, and in a module, it's a really, really small amount of compost. So I think
Yeah.
it's something like 2 liters of compost to fill up 60 modules. So it's really not a lot. And again, if you're using not such good compost, you'll end up having to use more of it. So it all kind of balances out eventually.
Definitely. I think I probably use about 2 bags of compost a year on my sowings, and probably chuck the rest on, like for sowings and pottings on, that's probably all I need. And then if there's any left over, I just go chuck it on my patch. Um,
Mm.
I know you use Moorland Gold, a couple of other options out there, Pete's Peat Free and Urban Worm. They're both quite fine tilthy composts that I've found pretty good success with. So yeah, these probably are three that we think are the best out there. Be mindful of just going to the garden centre and picking up the cheapest multi-purpose compost to sow seedlings into. It might have quite big twigs in it, and then if you imagine you're a baby little seedling, if you're trying to grow out the ground, a big heavy twig on top of you, they are really strong, but it might not have enough energy to push it out the way, and then it's going to rot in the ground.
Yeah, and it's always worth trying to get an organic one if you can, because in those seed compost they often will use chemical fertilizers if it's not an organic one, and we don't quite know the impact of putting those things in on the sort of longer scale on the ground and our bodies as well.
Yeah.
And when it finally becomes time to plant seedlings out, so if you've sown things in the sort of middle of February, it's definitely worth giving them a month. Sometimes 6 weeks can be helpful if the weather's really bad, and just sort of have a look at the weather forecast if you're wanting to plant something out. If it's going to be raining for the next week, they will benefit from staying in your kitchen or wherever they are. They're most likely going to be happier. If it's 2 weeks of rain and stuff, I'd say get them out under a fleece and just pray basically and keep things. That's a really good advice. Is always just keep sowing more and more. And when you're planting things out, especially in the early spring and up until the last frost date, which I think we'll cover later on, it's always worth planting something out with protection. So if you can put a bit of fleece down and make sure you secure it so it doesn't blow off in the wind, even having that fleece on for a week will just help those plants to sort of harden off and adapt to the climate that they're coming into. And get your structures into the ground sort of as soon as possible. That was a big learning thing for me last year. I didn't put my bean poles in until I planted my beans out, which was like June or something. And at that point, I couldn't get them far enough into the ground. And anyone who's watching from Avon Views will know that I spent all summer picking up my bean poles. And I was trying to grow tomatoes up them in the middle, and they all just ended up lying on the floor. And I still got a harvest, but didn't look very good.
I'm surprised that wasn't your lesson for 2024.
Yeah, well, the lesson I said has cost me financially because I'm supposed to be selling salad right now.
Fair, fair. Just for those of you who don't know, Charlie trained with Charles Dowding, and he runs a awesome little market garden just outside of Bath in Marshfield. So he spends his time between routes and his market garden. So it's a really lovely way for him to connect with people who might potentially buy his salad produce, and also share your amazing knowledge that you've picked up from the absolute no dig Don himself. Um, I just think like when you're talking about planting out, and it's like if you've got 2 weeks of rain, just chuck them out anyway. I think that's a really good attitude to have. I look for like 3 days of sunshine because I know that the slugs are really prolific in spring and summer if it's wet. If you put your seedling in and you know you've got a couple dry days ahead, then you know the slugs aren't out during the day. But if it's wet, then the slugs might be out during the day. But if if you look at the weather forecast, you're like, oh my God, it's nothing but rain. Put them out anyway. Just give them a go. You're like, if you've raised plugs, they're going to be slightly stronger than your direct sown seedlings. But yeah, and then I think the other thing in spring is like if you feel like you're not going to accomplish all of the planting of your patch that you can, then maybe think about a cover crop or a black plastic sheet, and then you can peel it back as a beginner and plant as you go without becoming overwhelmed. Because spring, our edibles love growing, but the plants that we don't want growing in our patch also love growing. So as Jazzy was saying, it's going to heat up and we're going to get a lot warmer conditions. So be aware of that. And if you need that additional training wheels and something to give you a bit of help just to cover that patch so you can take it bit by bit, then that's a really good thing to do to not let yourself become overwhelmed.
Yeah, don't be alarmed when your weeds start growing as well as your vegetable. It's meant to happen that way.
Yeah. So just quickly, we've got with our next slide is the last frost dates and the first frost dates of the year, taken with a little bit of pinch of salt. You know your area better than an internet app. We've amended the dates based on what our localized knowledge is as well. But the last frost date, that's when we're getting our last frost of the summer season. And then the first frost date is the first frost of winter. So the last frost date, there is a list of plants that we would really recommend not planting out before the last frost date. This is because they're very tender. they won't take a frost overnight unless they're
Mm.
potentially fleeced. But even then, some of them are so tender that they would become upset by that. And then the third most important one is like the list of things that we're going to talk about now. If you look at the temperature forecast and you go, oh my gosh, the temperatures are not going to be above 10 degrees at night, then a lot of these plants don't like nighttime temperatures below 10 degrees. That will stunt their growth and it will make them susceptible to disease and then in turn pest pressure, and they probably will die. So we've got tomatoes, cucumbers, squash, courgette, celery, climbing beans, dwarf beans, aubergine, melon, dill, basil, sweet potato, okra, chilies slash peppers, celeriac, tomatillo, and corn. Like these are our big watch out. Oh yeah, I do have cucumber as well. Big watch outs. I have seen some people sowing these um, online, and that's cool. Like we all learn from the mistakes that we make. I encourage you to still go and make them because you might sit here and listen to us on this Zoom call. You might go away and read a book, but until it affects you firsthand, you might not learn from it. So still just go for it. But that's our biggest watch out. So we will send around that list so people can understand that. We're just going to look at probably like one site for this because we are a big group of 9 growing communities now, which is amazing to say that considering that it was just me, Will, and Christian 3 years ago with this random idea, and now here we are. We're all on a Zoom call, and yeah, it's a bit surreal at times. But Bath, for instance, I've put the last frost date as late April. That being said, I have seen snow on Tucker's Meadow in April towards the end of it. One day I would have been doing a welcome slot in shorts and a t-shirt, and it was actually quite nice. And then the next day we had this random snow, and I was just like, what's going on here? So in able to prepare for last frost dates, maybe have a sowing that you're going to put out at the end of April if it's near your last frost date, and then have a backup sowing at home in some protection in a little mini greenhouse that you can whip out in the middle of May, and you're like, okay, the first tester failed. Let's bring out its protege, and hopefully it will have success. So yeah, I think that's quite a lot on spring. A lot of information to take on. It's a big part of the season. Go for it. Confidence and dedication because it will pay off. The seeds you sow in spring, they will really pay off in summer. And if you keep on sowing, then you're factoring in the potential of failure. Every time I go to Charles Dowding's, I'm like, dude, how is your garden so nice? And he's like, Ed, I'm prepared. I've got plugs. If a slug eats that, I put another one in. If a bird eats that, I put another one in. If a rabbit comes and munches on that, I've got another one as backup. So back up and so again. Really big lessons to learn from Charles to be like, wow, he is a wizard, he's a wizard. He's got his techniques. But yeah, spring and now onto summer, which is like when our locations look probably the best. End of July. That's my favorite time to walk around a Roots allotment site.
Yeah, it's high time for the garden. It's when you want to invite your friends down for a cup of tea or something cooler.
Yeah, or just that, yeah, a bit of this lettuce leaf, and they're like, "Are you crazy?" I'm like, "Yeah, maybe a little bit."
Good kind of crazy. Yeah, I'm gonna whip through summer, but I think mostly it's a time to slow down a little bit more than spring and to enjoy the space a little bit more. And obviously we're starting to harvest some things like salads. If you've managed to get carrots and parsnip and beetroot in early, you might be harvesting them as well. Yeah, usually there'll be lots of salads, and then just to be aware when a plant is about to, sometimes it can get really hot and then plants can bolt quite quickly. So
What is
yeah,
bolting?
it's
Just quickly
salads.
for the beginners.
All right, sorry.
Yeah.
Go to seed. Salads in particular, you can put them in and they look really happy and you're almost ready to harvest them, and then they can quickly kind of, not overnight, once you get to know the plant, you can see when they're about to go to seed. So I think particularly with salads, It's easy to sow them, it's easy to plant them out, but harvesting is just, you've got to really keep on top of the harvesting of your salads. So eat more salads in the summer. Thinking about watering, it depends what kind of weather we're having. But if it's dry, you can think about maybe putting sheep's wool or a mulch on top of your soil to keep the water in the soil so it doesn't dry out as quickly. I mean, obviously with no dig, your soil's not going to dry out as quickly, but if you're going away for a week, you can put that protection on there. And if you've got a lot of already established plants, that they still will be fine in the summer for a few days. You don't have to be there that often. But it's nice to be on the allotment in summer. Bring your deck chair down.
Enjoy your space.
Yeah, enjoy your space.
Yeah.
And I think really important as well is to keep sowing, like succession planting with carrots and beetroot and things like that. Just keep sowing.
Love that. And thinking about the late summer as an opportunity to sow for autumn and winter, that's a big one for me. That I've only learned in the last year, 2 years. Is like if you want to have things like lettuce and salads over winter, then you need to sow them in late August. And it's sometimes you can be like, oh, I've sown things since spring and in summer, and now it's autumn, and I've got a little bit of
Yeah,
sowing fatigue, but it is the
yeah,
final push, and it's like the final push in August will
yeah.
set you up for success over winter.
Yeah, it's good. It's good to think about winter and imagine that there's no food in the supermarkets and you need to grow more food. One thing I always do is at this time of year, my seed box is in complete chaos. I like to keep resourcing it and see what seeds there are that I can still put in the ground.
Nice.
Yeah, do that all
Amazing.
year, but it's good to do in summer.
It is the time of bountiful harvests, and it's a time to be enjoyed, and especially with the weather. And I think just to end it on summer, like my one of my favorite things to do in summer is like to give out the surplus of produce that I have, whether it's to a charity partner on a Roots allotment site or to the people on my road with my little sharing box. It's a nice opportunity to spread growing's good vibes. So yeah, thank you so much. Autumn. Autumn, autumn, autumn.
Awesome, autumn. Autumn's actually a really nice one. It's my favourite season. But I suffer in the heat, but I also complain in the cold. But I think autumn's a really cool one because obviously you get shorter days and you get colder temperatures, and as a result of that, in the same way we will, plants are naturally going to wind down. Really easy telltale, obviously, it's the trees. Like, have a look at the trees. Like, if those leaves are falling, it's a good indicator to start thinking, all right, you know, what else is going to be starting to sort of stop back? And that's also a really good time to literally count your chickens, like harvest. Like, autumn is when we should be harvesting. Big ones like squash, like harvest your squash, because when squash get frost damage, it is a shame. And be things like climbing beans as well. Like, make sure you get the last of those courgettes in. I mean, we were having courgettes, you know, up till a few weeks ago, really, still for some freak reason. And sweet corn as well. Like, really, that would be the one that I would encourage you to harvest as a priority. Because sweet corn is such a fun one to grow, but when you don't get it, it will die back. It will die back. But
Just a
also,
quick one. Just quick one on climbing beans. I've seen even when the bean pods go brown and
oh,
quite
they're still
crispy,
grand.
you can pop them open and you can get dried beans from within them. So I've spotted some dried podded beans on compost bins, and that is definitely food that we can eat, we can store over winter. And then Willem, I would in a very PC way, it'd be lovely if you could tell everyone about the holes in the pumpkins that we found, and what we thought was causing it and what was actually causing
Yeah. So what was interesting is so we were seeing, or what we thought was a lot of rodents boring their way through the pumpkins that had been maybe not harvested as quickly as they ought to have done. But what was really interesting, because I'd seen the rat try to get their teeth along the skin of the gourd, and they suffered, which was, much of their folly and plight. But then what would happen, which was interesting, is you get the corvids in the trees, and they'd come down and they'd make an initial borehole, and they'd get their bit, and then the rats would occupy it like a Sylvanian families. It was fascinating. It was a fascinating little experiment.
It was a mystery, wasn't it?
It was, but
bit of a
watching
mystery.
those corvids, they were like bloody woodpeckers for those pumpkins. It was a real pain in the ass.
But I just think on that note is about harvesting and harvest before nature gets it, and also sometimes you can harvest things like if you don't put your harvest expectations up to what the supermarket provides you. If you're thinking you're always going to grow supermarket level veg, then you're always going to be waiting for your harvest. I just try and eat things, see what they're like. Mainly the main thing that you've got to let ripen is probably squash and fruit, and those are the two things. But everything else can be eaten at various different
and a good thing that is probably worth mentioning as well is if something else has tried to eat your crops, that's a really good indicator that you can eat it as well. So if you've lost one, watch that, and it might be worth getting them before something else does, because if they've been there once, and you can't really blame them, and it's nice organic veg.
Exactly.
But I mean, other things you can do in autumn would be, put some cover crop down, or if you wanted to put anything in, maybe put broad beans in. Garlic's a great one to put in, because you put it in around autumn, comes up, summer. What I do is I put garlic in on the shortest day and harvest it on the longest. But it's a good time to think about things like soil health and like do your compost top up, or maybe mulch your bed. Think about adding nutrients in, because the big thing with autumn realistically is that's harvest time, and like where we're taking all of these delicious things from our plants on our plot. What we're doing as well, in the same way with if we're weeding to get it ready, we're taking nutrients from the soil. So it's actually a really important time to start thinking about what can I put back on top of it, and it could be fertilizers, mulches. There's 101 ways to skin a cat in that
Or
respect.
living
But
compost.
I think
If you're making it on your patch, I bring all my raw food waste from my kitchen every week and make living soil and spread that every year.
yeah,
I think autumn and possibly the back end of summer as well, a really good time to sort of look at your patch and evaluate what went well and what didn't go
Of
well, what
course.
could have done with more space, how healthy your plants are looking, why are they looking like that, just to learn for next year.
Yeah, reflection,
Yeah.
isn't it? Everything,
Reflection,
a lot of growing
definitely.
is resting, reflecting amongst the
Yeah.
hard work.
Cycles.
And then just taking down your structures. If you've got your bean poles up, you don't need them
Oh,
up.
of course,
Winter, yeah. It gets to a stage in the season where I notice the pest pressure from pigeons is reducing, and the cabbage whites are no longer about. So I give my brassica cage a bit of time without the net. But if you do notice the damage again, then just pop it back on. Brilliant. Right, the seasons, they are such interesting things to get our heads around as growers and understand the flow of them and how it can affect us. So thank you for the summaries of each one, guys. It's an important thing to us to start understanding, and growing journey. It's all about observing. So next, I just want to talk about a couple different ways to grow. Basically, you've got two ways. You've got plug plants, which is literally raising seedlings at home in module trays, toilet rolls, yogurt pots, whatever you've got, you can turn into a little growing capsule for your plant. And then you raise them to be like, 2 to 3 to 4 inches tall, depending on the plant. That could be 3 to 6 weeks old. And then you pop them in your patch, and they've got a little bit more oomph behind them. But that being said, that does require maybe a very small bit of outdoor space. Windowsill growing can be quite challenging if you've not got the right light levels. And then on the other hand, we've got direct sowing, which is literally sticking seeds straight in the ground as if our ancestors have practiced for thousands of years. So Jazzy's going to take us through some direct sowing info. But like I said, it's down to you what your situation is. So hopefully once we've gone through this, you can go, oh yeah, I'm going to do some direct sowing. I'm going to do some plug plants. That being said, if you can only direct sow, we do supply you with plug plants throughout the year, so you can get an experience of this other side of growing, even if you're spatially challenged.
Yeah, I'm big direct sowing advocate because I don't have space at home to sow anything in modules. So it just makes life so easy for me to bang things in the ground. And then you don't have to plant things out, you don't have the faff. I'm also not organised enough to have loads of spare plugs at home. I wish I was. So there's all the pros to it. It's really time efficient, it's really easy, you don't have space, and it's also much cheaper, so much cheaper to get lots of good quality seed rather than popping back and forth to the garden centre and buying those expensive little plugs. You can really do that at home on your own. There are lots of cons to direct sowing, like what I was saying about like the fact that I had to re-sow so many times last spring, because you do get much higher rates of failure. You've got lots of weed pressure from things coming in. You've got lots of pests that want to snack on those brilliant, amazing seeds, which are literally seeds of life, full of all the nutrients.
Well, we like microgreens, don't we? So
Yeah, the most amazing, full of all the genetic material. So it can be kind of harder to get them to germinate, like especially in terms of weed pressure. If you're new to growing and you don't know what your weed seeds look like, that your seed leaves. I've got tangled in those words there. Seed leaves, and they all kind of almost look similar, and it's kind of hard to tell the difference between your weeds and what your little seedlings are. Can be really important to make sure you get the spacing right on things, and sometimes seeds go everywhere. I'm all for chaos gardening, but it can make your life difficult. And then it's really important to think about watering and temperature, like what we were talking about with the seasons earlier. You really want to make sure it's warm enough. You really don't want to overwater them. You really don't want to underwater them. So you really got to be specific. Look on your seed packets. Really check out what this individual seed needs. Yeah.
great. It does work. We have practiced it as a species for thousands and thousands of years. So, this technique definitely does work. It's just down to what you've got available to you. Yeah. Who's chatting about plug plants?
I'm pro plug.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, so plug plants, it's if you're really sort of keen and eager to get going like me, it means you can start your season about a month earlier. So that's really exciting for all you eager growers out there. Generally, you have a much better chance of success. It's mostly chance in this kind of game of growing vegetables, though. So don't be disheartened if you plant out plugs and they get killed straight away. It's sort of you have much more control over your seedlings if you've got them at home versus on your allotment site that you may visit once a week. That can be a sort of bit of a curse as well, because often people tend to overwater plug seedlings because they're just so keen to, they just almost smother them with love. I've been guilty of that on many occasions, especially when I was sort of getting into this. You can plan a bit more for succession as well. So you have a bit more flexibility rather than having to wait for a space to open up on your patch. You can sort of eyeball something and think, oh, that's going to come out in a month. I'm going to sow something now to sort of jump in there behind it. And that can give you a great advantage to kind of always keep your ground full of reasonably sized plants. And it's much easier to plant them out and sort of visualize your spacing as well when you've got them there, rather than popping these seeds in, trying to remember where you put them all, and then try not to come back and plant more seeds over the top, which I've done. It's really good.
I've never done that. What are you on about?
Yeah, I've done that a lot. I've even put like dahlia bulbs down and then planted something else right on top of them, like a squash. And I thought I had some mutant plant, but actually it's just
that'd be cool though.
And it means you can sort of multi-sow as well and have a bit more control over that. Multi-sowing is just putting more than one seed in a plug plant or in a module tray. It's great for things like beetroot and stuff like that. Not so great for things like squash or salad. Some of the drawbacks to it are you need a bit of space to do it in your house. My partner she's all right at the moment, but in about a month's time, she's going to start getting really annoyed with me because I will have plug plant trays on every single flat surface in the house where there is some sort of light, and I'll be rotating because you want them to be in good light. If they're not in good light, they'll get really leggy, which means long You can kind of combat that by turning them around every day, but they still end up leggy, and it's a dangerous game to play. So just be considerate of your partner or whoever you're sharing a house with as well. Not everyone likes plug plants all over the place and all the moisture and water and mud that goes along with it. It can be expensive to get set up to do plug planting. Again, you can often sort of get like plugs left over from garden centers and things like that, or if you buy some plugs, you can then reuse those cell trays that they came in. But it's certain things can be expensive. Again, the compost can be something that can be quite expensive to get going on. And it can just take a bit more time and energy than just chucking some seeds in your patch. You've got to be sort of slightly careful when you're planting them out. I mean, I would never say just grow plug plants. I would always say do a bit of both, and don't rely totally on yourself growing plug plants. That was something that it took me a couple of years to really get the hang of it. Obviously, we run some really, really good workshops around this, and I saw from the people that came to the workshops last year, you could see it in their growing throughout the year. So I definitely recommend coming to them and sort of getting up close and personal with it, with someone who kind of knows what they're doing, because there's a lot of myths out there, and just things like how much compost to put in a plug. Things like that can really give you a lot more success. So the nuances in it can really, really help you, and don't be disheartened if it takes you a few years to get the hang of it.
And we've got a whole hour and a half on in-person workshop on plug plant aftercare, basically. So like this session, but just about plugs. That's why when we were planning this, we were like, how do we just try and condense the information and get through it? But yeah, give it both a go. And then just like the final little tip from us is you should only direct sow carrots and parsnips. Don't go buy plug plants of carrots and parsnips. They are essentially one long root, and if you transplant it and you break the root, it will fork guaranteed, and then you'll end up with them looking like that. So always give them a direct sow. But yeah, so thanks Charlie, thanks Jazz for that. That's awesome. Lots of things to consider, and hopefully we've helped you navigate to figure out what you might put more energy into and which way you might want to grow. So next up, I'm just going to talk a little bit about rotating crops. It is spoken about a lot in agriculture, in horticulture. It is something that I can see has a really important place in regenerative agriculture and slightly bigger scale market gardening and growing, where you can use cover crops to rotate different crops that you've grown in your fields. You might have caused a bit of damage to the soil, and then you're going to need to rotate something in it. What I want you to take from this as a beginner is that because we're practicing no dig, we're feeding the soil microbes. The soil microbes in turn make our plants the healthiest they can be. So a lot of the time, there isn't a need to rotate as such. I've spoken to Charles. He's not rotated his potatoes for the last 10 years. He's grown them in the same spot. He's confident that it's because he is feeding the soil and giving it the nutrients that it needs. But to briefly talk about a sort of rotation within your patch that you could consider is consider growing your beans, your peas in a different location every year, and you could rotate that with your salad. The reason why we're sort of recommending that as our beginner rotation is because beans and peas, they have really long roots that can sort of penetrate into the soil. They do cycle nutrients within the soil, and they can help break up bits of compaction. So when your peas or your beans are done, that's so hard to say, I've only realized. Chop them at the base, leave the root structure in. The roots will decompose, and then they'll become tracks for worms to go through, and then other microbes will benefit from the worm presence. So it's just like you can go really deep into rotation, but I think for a beginner session, just think about rotating peas, beans with salad. And that's easy. Just grow them in a different place every year, and then that'll start to build up some soil fertility on top of the soil fertility that you're building already, because you're practicing no dig. So yeah, that's sort of my two-piece on rotation, and just some examples of cover crops that you could potentially use if you want to get into a bigger level of rotation. If you've got a big blank space and you're like, I'm not actually going to put anything in there, then you can view using a cover crop as a part of that rotation. So you could use green mustard, buckwheat, fodder radish. Those are a few really easy ones to get used to and give it a go with. Yeah, quite a big topic. I noticed that we're getting quite close to time. If people want to stay for the rest of it, we've only got a couple more topics to cover. So if you do want to stay, please stay. If you don't want to stay, then obviously feel free to leave. We are recording this, so you can view it at a later date if you've got something really important to get to. And we may or may not do a Q&A depending on what time we leave, but we will take questions and we can answer them at the end virtually, or just in a big email broadcast. We'll go, these are the questions that we got asked, and this is our answers to it. So yes, additional growing aids and pest control. I think this is quite an important topic for us to cover. We have spoken about different bits and bobs throughout it, but yeah, this is sort of the things that we think you should think about as a beginner.
Yeah, so I'll start off by talking about natural fertilizer, because it is, as old as the hills. Like, people have been making fertilizer, naturally for thousands of years. So, obviously the massive shift towards using synthesized fertilizer, it was maybe a necessity to feed a growing population, but not necessity to us on our small patches. And there's loads. It's super easy. And you can make it out of just loads of weeds growing around you. Things like, nettles, comfrey, dandelions, cleavers, chickweed, even horsetail. Basically, the process is just nice and easy. To chop them up, put them in some water in a vat, and leave it to brew. All of those plants, they're rich in a myriad of different things. Like, nettles are super high in nitrogen. Comfrey's like a wicked source of potassium. Horsetail as well, which is a really rogue one. Horsetail, because they're one of the few plants that don't make leaves because they're so prehistoric, but they're a really wicked source of silica. So if you make a fertilizer out of horsetail, it's fantastic source of silica, which is great for plant cell growth.
Just make sure it's really, really broken down in a liquid.
Exactly. So I'm saying that
there.
saying that like a little bit tentatively, because horsetail is a bit of a nightmare.
Maybe
But
beginners stick to comfrey and nettle as an entry level to this.
Of course. But yeah, it's nice and easy. They last a long time. I would just encourage people to not be too overzealous, because there is the temptation when you've got a bucket of fertilizer which has the potential to maximize all of your crops, to be quite overzealous with it. And that could be with your dilution rate, or just feeding too regularly. And plants just don't like that. So I would definitely encourage all of you guys to check out how to make natural fertilizers. It's super simple, but just be cautious in how much you use them, really.
We've also got lessons on our members area to show you how to make liquid fertilizer.
And we've got some workshops coming up very soon.
Great.
Yeah.
In-person workshops. Come learn yourself. And also there's a technique called chopping and dropping that you can use with comfrey leaves and seaweed, where you literally just get the leaves and you chop it and you drop it on your patch. There's some conversations around whether chopping and dropping things can lead to increased slug habitat, because they like decomposing leaves. But if you are at the sea and you've researched whether you can sustainably harvest seaweed from the seashore, never harvest it live from rocks, then you could grab yourself a little bag of seaweed, wash it off at home, and sort of chop it up and sprinkle that around your patch. That will naturally start to decompose and spread its nutrients into the soil. Also, because of it has a little bit of salinity to it, the slugs don't go for the seaweed. So
It could also be worth saying as well, like, if you've got these natural fertilizers and you've got a composter on your patch, add the fertilizer to the compost, because it all just helps feed those microbes. Like, it helps break it down. Like, give your your composter a little spray every now and again. All good stuff.
Your liquid fertilizer will be high in nitrogen, and a lot of these beneficial soil microbes do have quite a high nitrogen diet. So yeah, give it a go.
Right, so compost. Let's talk about compost, because it's one of the most important things I think. But it's to make it clear between soil and compost, if you really like the very basics of it, is compost is still just matter. It is still it's not soil. It doesn't have all the root nutrients. It is still like organic matter, just your broken down organic matter. And I know we give out a big piles of compost, and it's amazing to be able to do these big compost top ups on our patches. But we are giving you municipal compost, which is compost that's been heated up to a massive temperature by the Council Green Waste. And it is so amazing to make your own compost on your patch, because it just has so much more life in it, so many more nutrients. It really is so amazing to get one of those little composters. And just to talk a little bit about like keeping the nutrients on your patch, like if you're growing things, or if there's weeds on your patch, to be able to break those down in your composter, you're just feeding that nutrient straight back to your patch again. Same with all the excess parts of your plants that you aren't going to eat, put them in there. But really important to chop them up really small, because if you want your compost to heat up to a good temperature and you want it to really break down quickly, you've got to chop everything up nice and small, have your greens in there, put in your raw organic food waste. There's loads of good stuff in there. Bring your little compost tub from home, and then to make sure that you have your browns in there, and we've got those on the little signs on the compost bins. But you need to have your greens and your browns. So chucking on a little bit of wood chip can be a bit nitrogen robbing, but just like you need your sticky things and your mushy things, and to layer them up. Otherwise, the whole thing just turns into an anaerobic mush. And you need to have those both layers of things to really get yourself your dream compost. And it's amazing. What else is written on here?
When you dig to the bottom of your compost pile, when the way to know it's ready is if it sort of smells like a woodland floor and looks a bit like dark chocolate. I think that's a
Yeah.
really good indicator to know, oh, can I make a compost tea out of this? Should I sprinkle some of it on my patch? If it's like that, then go for it.
Mm.
Yeah, no, yeah, composting, it's really important. And what I think is the biggest thing to take out that I've seen from allotment sites is people pulling up plants and produce by the root and bringing a big load of soil and compost with them and putting it in a compost bin. If you're putting big lumps of soil and compost into compost bins, you're basically defeating the object of composting, because you're putting something that's already composted on a compost pile. So just think about what you do with your big lumps of things. You should probably bash them up and put them back onto your patch. But just a bit of a watch out that I noticed from all the allotment sites that I visited now.
And we were talking about seed compost earlier. There's nothing richer and nothing better for your plants than live, living compost than anything you'll buy in a plastic bag.
Yeah, totally agree with what you're saying here. Yeah. um, Anti-frost fleece. Who's
Yeah,
taking this one?
that's me. Yeah, so anti-frost fleece is exactly what it says on the tin. Basically, it's just this thin fleece. You can buy it from the garden centers. I think it's relatively cheap. One thing that's worth noting is you want to go for the slightly thicker stuff. If you buy the really, really cheap thin stuff, it can just sort of degrade when it rains. And that sort of is generally spreading plastics and things all over your patch. So
Yeah.
watch out for that. Just give it a feel and make sure it feels like it's not just going to break down overnight. And when you do put it down, just ensure that it's really well weighted down. Things like that can just blow off in the wind really easily and either blow onto someone else's patch, or at the sort of minimum, it's not going to have that effect on your patch if it's 2 miles down the road. So yeah, that's it for
Right. I think we'll put a list at the end of places that we recommend getting these products from. And I think Crocus do a plastic-free anti-frost fleece now. So it's good that the horticultural scene is starting to evolve away from plastic, because there is so much plastic involved in it. It's hard for us to get our heads around. But yeah, moving on, brassica cage, really simple. If you're going to grow cabbage, cauliflower, kale, Brussels sprouts, purple sprout and broccoli, you're going to need a brassica cage. There are butterflies and pigeons that love feasting on brassicas. The butterflies use the brassicas as a habitat, so they lay their eggs on it, then they'll demolish your greens. And then the pigeons, they'll just land on any brassica that they like, and they'll just peck away at it, and you'll come back and it'll look like a stalk. You're like, what has happened to my plant? So brassica cage on the members area, there's a really simple video. I've just made it. It's literally 4 posts in the ground, and then you put the net over it, got little hooks that you hook it to on the top and the bottom, and then I use tent pegs to put it into the ground to really secure it. Because when we're making structures on site, it's just always good to think about how do I make the structure as nature friendly as possible. So for me, when you're looking at using any sort of netting, make sure there's no holes in it. Make sure you're pegging the gaps down, you're closing off the gaps with twine, because we do walk around our locations and we do have to free birds from our netting a lot of the time. Now, I've never had a bird trapped in my netting because I take that extra due diligence to make sure that I'm going to try and grow in as nature friendly way as possible. It's a really important one for me. If you are bringing a structure or a netting or something to site that something could get caught on, it's now your responsibility as a human to make sure you visit us regularly to make sure that structure is not damaging anything in the natural world. So please take responsibility for the things that you bring to our allotment sites. That's the biggest thing that I probably want to say about that. So yeah. Bean poles.
Oh yeah, bean poles. We supply we sell in our shop hazel bean poles, which we get from a local hazel coppice, and it's super amazing, super sustainably sourced. Really amazing for like layering your growing, think about growing structures which you can grow your food up on, so you're not just spreading things out on the floor. You can really maximize your space. You can be really taking it, do different things with them, cut them in half, do some funky things with them, get creative, build an archway, all sorts.
They're
Yeah.
great. They're great. I use them for my beans, and then I also chop them in half and use them to support my sunflowers as they're growing.
Yeah.
They're amazing. And then once you've used them for like 4 seasons, I think I'm on my 4th season now of my first lot. I think probably even next year, this year or next year will be their last year, and I'll just snap them up and put them in my compost bin, and they will turn into living soil eventually. So creating a cycle, and I've noticed that the bamboo poles just really do not decompose as in similar ways, and who knows where they're grown, who knows where they come from. But coppicing is a really lovely way to extend the life of a tree. So yeah, it's something we fully support. Yes. The next topic is
Rodents.
yeah.
Rodents. Right. So one thing that I think is definitely worth mentioning, and this would be the first thing I would say to anybody about rodents, is the way that we get rid of them is we try to mitigate their habitat. We want to reduce their habitats, right? But the irony is, guys, we are growing in their habitat, so it's almost an inevitability that you know that they're going to be about, and you can't blame them. Like if you're growing a whole patch full of delicious organic veg, there'd be a muggins to not try and eat that. And fair play to them. Like I salute them. But one of the things that we really can do, well, two things, or three things really. I'd say if you've got a shed or you've got a box or you've got anything that's got a degree of permanence, I would really implore you to dig in chicken wire, because the difference between, you know, if you dig in a couple feet skirt of chicken wire and then you bury that, they just can't get through it, and like they just simply can't. It's the same with like rabbit proofing, so it's exactly the same principle. It's the same with your boxes as well. Like maybe consider digging them in a bit. But really what they're doing, what rats are doing, is they're kind of showing us if we're being a little bit untidy or if we've got food that's available. So if there's rat presence, it's a good indicator to say, all right, maybe I need to start popping down a bit more and, you know, harvesting my crops before they do. But also that there are some really easy ways of like getting rid of them, and that is just increased presence, presence through different, you know, all sorts of different things. Could be natural predators or just our presence in general. Simple things like bordering your patch with you know, plants that are smelly, like high terpene plants like chives and thyme. They hate the smell of it because what rats do, which is unsurprising, they've got wicked senses of smell, way better than any of us. So that's why they can smell when your sweet corn's ready, because they can smell the sugars inside of it. And basically, if you can find a way of masking their scent trail, so you can do it with a very smelly crop like, you know, chives or whatever, bruising it to release their smells, or diatomaceous earth is a good way of masking scent trails, or urine is also a good one. Dog hair, human hair, just trying to block their scent trail and stopping the instances in which they can get your crops. And that comes down to checking out when they're blooming ready and making sure
Yeah.
you've got them.
Definitely.
This is-
I totally agree.
Probably putting some bird boxes on site as well to encourage predators.
Oh
Exactly.
yeah, we've
It's a
got
good
a
one.
we've got a little section on that, definitely. I just think, yeah, with rodents, if you spot them in your compost bin and you know that they're in your
Yeah,
compost,
give it a turn, like give it a
turn it.
jostle, like
Yeah,
just turn it. Yeah.
disrupt their habitat. I spotted them in mine. I let them hang out there for a little bit because they do
Mm,
aerate it and they do create tracks for it. But then I will eventually give it a turn and disrupt their
mm,
habitat and get them away. But I mean, that being said, some of them have lived in my compost bin and I've not suffered from the pressure from them. But I understand that some people do. But like
mm,
what Willem was saying is like we have seen crops out in the field that maybe for 2 or 3 weeks, 4 weeks have been there, and then you just go, well, of course something's going to eat it, and whether it's
mm,
a rat or something else, it's gonna
mm.
get that because it's food and it's there, and if you don't get it, then nature's going to get it. That's the reality of growing. Um, yeah,
That's it.
rodents, big topic, interesting one
Yeah.
to navigate with lots of different members across different allotment sites as well. So let's all keep the conversation open and we can all work together to make their pressure less.
Mm.
But I mean,
Big team, I think.
it might make sense just to quickly chat about the natural predators, Willem, because I think you
Well, so yeah,
have
like
that as
so
well.
obviously what rats so when we see natural predators on our site, what that's really telling us is that there is uh food. So when we see presence and you see a feeding presence, that's it's generally, you see the natural predators and they are there to eat the things like the rats. But what we need to really do as well, and what we want to focus on is we want to keep them coming back. So we want to encourage natural predator. We've got a it's on our lead site where we've got a really nice raptor perch, and they're
That's
seeing
a kestrel.
buzzards, they're seeing kestrels, and like just those two raptors alone are like really good examples of raptor predators that operate on different levels. So like they're feeding at different times, they're feeding at different heights, and they're working symbiotically. But what they're doing is they're keeping the blooming rodent population down. And the same with like if you've got like bird boxes, like what Nat was saying. If you've got bird boxes, then we can encourage things like you'll get owls on your site, and then you've got nocturnal activity, and then you've got raptors using your site for feeding and breeding all through the day. So it's really really important. Like I do think yeah,
They'll
raptors
find us, won't they?
But
Like
this is the same thing on all levels of, like, not just with rodents. It's about having that balanced cycle in where you've got a
exactly.
massive invasion of these of aphids, and suddenly all your ladybirds come in and eat them all. It's that having that balanced cycle
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
having the predators and the prey.
That's exactly it.
I guess that's what our these three squares on our screen are about, aren't they? It's about trying to balance that. And
Mm.
just to note, like Leeds is the only location that we've installed a raptor perch at, but we have got photographic evidence of kestrels using Tucker's Meadow to hunt and feed. So even without us installing that habitat there, we're on
Mm,
this is our fourth growing season at Tucker's Meadow now. So it has taken 4 years for them to understand that that is a habitat that they can feed off, but we are getting there. And Willem, you've spotted them, so we will
mm.
put up a perch, but we didn't need to, which is so interesting. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, everything's about balance, isn't it? But
I think it also comes back to replicating nature and diversity. If we're enhancing diversity, we're enhancing the biodiversity, we're creating more stability, and the system is more balanced out, and
Mm,
animals will look after each other, and you won't have too much of one thing and not enough of the other.
definitely.
And I think when you're planting your plots, you need to be thinking about diversity as well. You don't know what the weather's going to do, you don't know what pests are going to come in each year, but if you keep a real kind of wide range of flowers, herbs, vegetables, and fruit, that you're always going to have a harvest.
Totally
Also,
agree
a
with you.
mixture of annuals and perennials. Yeah, you're going to encourage beneficial insects. If you plant fennel, for instance, you're going to attract ladybirds.
That is a ladybird
If
larvae that I'm circling now, just so people are aware, like when it gets to early spring and you see these crawling on your plants, they're not bad guys. They do look like bad, they do look quite menacing.
Like little
They're,
dragons.
they're tiny, but they're wicked. They
they're
will
like
munch on
alien
aphids all
life
day,
forms.
won't they? and then that turns into a beautiful ladybird. It's like what? Um, but yeah, bronze fennel, herb fennel, really good habitat. I've seen
Yeah.
these guys. The ladybirds lay their eggs in them, and it's unbelievable to see how many could be on one at one time. So yeah, love that. I did want to talk a little bit about parasitic wasps, but we're not going to go deep into it. And all I'm going to say on this subject is that if you're planting things like bronze fennel and herb fennel, then you will be attracting ladybirds and you will be attracting parasitic wasps. The ladybirds, they eat the aphids, and parasitic wasps do a really interesting job of laying their eggs in cabbage white butterflies, and then they sort of explode. Um, but I'm not going deep into it because it's too much. But plant bronze fennel or herb fennel, and both of those insects benefit from it. So as a beginner, that's probably your one takeaway from that. And then on to our biggest topic, because I know everyone's been like, well, what about slugs? Where are the slugs? Uh, well, they do eventually turn up, don't they? Just like they have in this presentation. Um, I think, yeah, slugs. It's a it's a really interesting topic to navigate. What do slugs like? Slugs like living in a moist, damp, dark environment. If you can reduce the amount of moist, damp, dark environments on your patch, then you will reduce the slug pressure that you're suffering from. I think, yeah, during the rainy months, they can be out literally night and day. They can be quite daunting and menacing. There are some things that you can do to alleviate slug pressure. That number one, reducing habitat. So if you were thinking of putting wooden borders on your bed, if you don't want to increase slug numbers, then don't put wooden borders on your bed. It's literally that simple. Wooden borders are an aesthetic thing for me. I can understand why some people like them. Go for it if you want to do it, but we're giving you the 101 information to know that you are increasing the slug pressure on your produce. Um,
Well, I think
secondly,
it's worth saying, like, because slugs, they have to lay their eggs on a surface, guys. So, like, if you've got a raised bed, and you can sometimes see it, like you'll peel back a little bit of the soil and you'll see them stuck to it. And it equally can be said with blooming plastic pots where people bring in pots from home, and it sounds really weird to say, have you looked all around the pot for slug eggs? But if you don't, and then you put them on your patch, you can inadvertently introduce a whole new population of slugs to
but I
terrorize your
think
crops.
that's a really good bit of advice about checking pots before you bring them, just to reduce slug pressure. But
Mm.
also, if you are growing your plug plants at home in a mini greenhouse, the amount of times I've been out, I've had a little look at my plants. I do a slug hunt at 11 p.m. at night when I'm growing my seedlings, because if you don't check underneath module trays, there might be one living there, and then it can come out at night and it can literally munch through every single one of your seedlings in a CD60. That's 60 seedlings in one night, and then you wake up in the morning and you're just like, oh, it's heartbreaking. So,
Yeah,
yeah, check
heartbreaking.
your module trays when you're sowing your seedlings, just in case you've got any hungry hippos in there. Um, but just like circling back to what a slug is and why are they doing these things in our patch? Well, a slug's role in nature, what nature has created it to do, is to decompose. They are just doing their job. Slugs love eating, decomposing matter. They're drawn to it. So that's why Charles Dowding really implores people to do that maintenance on your patch. So get rid of your yellowing leaves, pop them in your compost bin, because it's the ammonia in the yellowing of the breaking down plant matter that the slugs sort of hone in on. And
Mm.
ammonia, funnily enough, is alcohol. And then when you think about other methods of potentially controlling slugs, you go to beer traps, and then you can make the connection between why they're drawn to the beer trap and why they're drawn to your decomposing matter. It's very similar things. My nan, she loves to chop slugs in half with trowels. I can't quite bring myself to kill slugs. There is this big camp where it's like, do we want to kill them? Do we want to try and work with them? I'm more in the work with them camp. I know my other panelists have different opinions, but when I go on slug hunts and I look underneath leaves, I put them in a bucket and I just chuck them on my compost bin. I'm processing so much raw vegetarian kitchen waste from my kitchen that they do have enough to snack on, I hope, and I don't suffer from the pressure. Um, but I know there are slug killers amongst us. But if you don't want to do that, you can transfer them or chuck them in a hedge. But I've heard that some people have even put what is it? The radioactive chemical isotopes in a slug and traced them 3 miles, took them 3 miles away, and they've come 3 miles back or something. It's just some they'll find a way to return it.
Well, I do think it's worth saying as well, like with what slugs do, which is it might make you warm to them somewhat, because they're actually quite incredible creatures. Because when a slug would eat one plant, right, that plant will then send out shock signals naturally because it's being eaten. In the same way if someone was eating you, you'd probably make a scream. But what slugs can do is they can perceive that. They can perceive those shock signals. And that's why if you don't get that affected plant out, so say if you've got a row of 10 and one of them's been eaten, if you don't whip that one out, the stress signal from that plant will encourage all of the slugs to go, here it is. Look, here's the good stuff. So just if you've seen nibblings, get your flashlight out, whip out the affected one, and get your flashlight out, because otherwise they're tenacious little buggers.
But that's only if it's been like proper stripped back to nothing, right? Like if we are suffering from, if we're seeing holes and here and there in our plants, leave them in, try and let them outgrow the growth. But if they're not,
Oh, I was more
not.
saying about like seedlings, like littlies, like
Right,
because a lot of what I mean, like brassicas in winter. If you can show me a cabbage grown organically in winter that hasn't got a slug in it, I'll give you a tenner. Like, because
Yeah,
they're
exactly.
they're just there, and like
Yeah.
they're not bad guys, really. They're just there.
This is the beauty about organic growing, though. It opens your eyes up to what actual produce is, and it's not this manicured, highly washed, clean, chemically stuff that we get from the supermarket. And if you do want to actually nourish your body and what you're putting in it, and you want to avoid these chemicals that are in the system, then you are going to have to come across bugs and creepy crawlies, and that is just part of it. And I guess if you really can't get over that, then maybe the supermarket shelves are right for you. But I'd like to think with time, anyone can get used to them and actually learn to love them. And I love the creepy crawlies that are on my patch and visit me. And it's just fascinating. It's like Nat was saying at the start, just sitting there and just observing everything that happens. It's beautiful.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, homegrown veg should always be judged first on taste, and then
Mm.
everything else is way down the line, I think.
Yeah, even if it's got a
Very
hole in, it
good
might
point.
taste amazing, right?
Yeah, it probably does because someone's already had a bite.
Yeah, exactly.
And another thing with slugs, it's like if you get rid of every single slug on your patch, then you're going to have nothing to attract the predators that feed on those slugs in. So it's always worth thinking it's all about balance. And if you take out all of the prey, then you can't have any predators either.
Yeah, that's a really lovely point.
And then I was going to do sacrificial plants and companion planting. So these are it's pretty simple. There's certain plants that certain pests are drawn to. For example, brassicas, cabbage white butterflies are really drawn to them. So if you've got some amazing brassicas, you put a beautiful cage up and you really want to protect them, sometimes it's worth just chucking another brassica on the opposite end of your patch with zero protection and hoping that they're all drawn to that rather than going after all your lovely ones that you're looking after. And then again, with companion planting, you can get way into this, and there's loads of myths out there of some things that do and some things that don't work. But a really good way to think about it is just mix up your plantings. You don't have to do, if you've got 100 garlic bulbs to put in, you don't have to put them all right next to each other. You can do a bit here and a bit there. And breaking your patch up with that diversity will naturally help to sort of these plants will work as companions. There's certain things like planting your onions next to your carrots that are talked about a lot and can be really beneficial. But I think as a rule of thumb in your first year, just mix it all up together and you will sort of benefit from that.
Lush. I'm getting more into growing flowers and different things here and there. And once you understand how big a plant is and what the room it's going to take up, it's so much easier to visually design your space, isn't it? But that comes with
Yeah.
experience and experimentation. Just be creative, be free, play with it. Nature is your playground on that 36 square meters of starter patch. That's how I view it. Live in a flat, don't really have much of a garden, so it's a really lovely space to be creative. So for those who are still on the call, thank you so much for staying with us. This is our last topic that we're going to go over. We have overrun by half an hour. I did think that was going to happen, but we won't do a Q&A. I can't keep everyone later than this. But we're going to go over the essentials of patch maintenance. It's a really important one for people to just to get an idea of right, I'm getting involved in this growing. This is what my summer's going to look like, or this is what the process is behind doing my patches. Um, so we have broken it down pretty easy for you guys with bullet points and all of that sort of jazz. But I think we're gonna start on the biggest topic, which is probably weeding. Um, Jazz, are you talking about weeding?
Oh yeah, I am.
I think you are.
That's a massive one to go into.
But I think maybe the main thing to try and get out is just what is weeding with no dig?
Weeding with no dig is about trying to do minimal soil disturbance, isn't it? Not trying to dig into the soil. Um, Obviously digging out your pernicious weeds, the kind of weeds that have roots that will grow back from the roots. But mostly with weeding, I just say little and often, get your hoe out, rake across the top of the soil, really like. And it's the same with like the slug talk. Like, don't let a weed see the daylight. Like, going in there, mashing it out. When things are really small, they're so easy to remove, and you really don't disturb the soil. Um, Obviously, there are other things that you do need to take out, but yeah, I'm definitely missing loads of stuff.
That's all good.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that was the
I
nice.
think
That was the nice comment of weeds are just plants in the wrong place. That was nice.
yeah, yeah. I think that's
What
something
is
that
a weed?
Charles talks about a lot, isn't it? It's just like let's not persecute these plants. They are doing a job. They have a role in nature. They're just growing in the wrong place for us.
The
That's
And
it.
buttercups are lovely in the path. Just get them out my bed.
give them an inch, and they'll take a mile, won't they? And like, I don't let it stack up. If you don't do your weeding for 8 weeks, 9 weeks, 10 weeks, it is going to be a whole Saturday commitment.
Mm.
Patch turned around.
And
If
the
you come
roots are deep in the
consistent to it,
soil, and when you pull them out, you're gonna have to disturb everything.
that's
That's
it.
really the thing. As a
Yeah.
newbie, to stay on top of it when it's small, slowly you'll learn the leaves of everything. You'll know what's a weed and what is something you planted. Really make sure you label what you have planted if you're not familiar with things so that you can remember what is and isn't a weed. Because it just takes time to learn what a weed is and you'll get
Yeah.
there.
And the
Suddenly you
healthier your soil, the less weed pressure you should suffer from too. So
Mm.
when I started on Tucker's Meadow, I had bindweed, creeping thistle, creeping buttercup, and a low groundsel. You name it, I probably had it in my patch. And I'm on this is my fourth season growing now. I've consistently done a top up of green waste compost blended with manure, and the amount of pressure that I'm suffering from year after year is just dropping and dropping and dropping because I'm locking the other weed seeds into the layers of the soil, and my soil is a lot healthier from
Yeah,
a
to explain that, looking at the weed seeds in the soil, when you're digging, you're turning the soil over, and there's lots of seed from all the weed seeds that they've dropped down in the soil. Then when you're turning the soil over, you're exposing all those seeds, and then they all germinate, and that's part
yeah.
of why not digging means that those soil seeds don't pop back
Mm.
up again.
Definitely. Little and often. If you do it little and often, you can treat it as meditation. If you
Yeah.
don't, then it's more of a workout. Um, and then get your friends to help you with it. Like it's a nice thing to do together, isn't it? And there's lots more weeds in summer, but we sort of covered that when we were talking um about the seasons. And then I guess the next thing, Charlie, you're going to take this one, but I just think this is something that is actually a really underappreciated part of growing and something that people don't learn about. I didn't learn about it until year two, until Charles came. Charles came and visited my patch at Tucker's Meadow, and he went, "Why aren't you edging?" And I said, "I don't even know what that is, mate." So, Charlie, take it away.
Yeah, so it's one of those ones people put off for ages, and it's kind of like people think, what is it? Like it looks hard. It's not hard at all. It's super easy, and it's one of the most satisfying things you could do on your patch, I reckon. If you're like me anyway, I really enjoy it. So basically what you're doing is you're just cutting the grass back to stop it growing into your patch. Lots of weeds that can sort of spread inwards. There's bindweed, creeping buttercup, creeping thistle, couch grass. All of these things will grow happily in the pathways and are just waiting for the chance to spread into your beds that have got like this beautiful compost that, quite often there's not a lot of competition. So they're always trying to creep in, and you just want to come along with your edger and just chop the edge back. Also, a common thing for me is people saying, I think my patch has got smaller, or are you making the patches smaller? and they're not getting smaller. It's just the edge is growing in. So it's really important to just keep on cutting them back. And just when you do that, don't dig it out too deep, because you can create a little bit of a moat. And then when we come around and try to mow, the mower goes into the ground and then it starts cutting up the pathway, and it can be a bit of a nightmare. So keep on top of your edges, just like weeding, do it little and often, and it will really reward you with a lot less work in the long run.
Lush. And you can do it with a spade or a half moon edger. I think that's the thing. You don't need to have a half moon edger to do edging. I do all of mine with a spade. And we used to give out edgers on our allotment sites, but people were using them like spades and then they just broke. So we have stopped giving them out. Maybe we'll give them out again, but maybe people will need to do some sort of a certification on how to use a half moon. I don't know. But you can do it with a spade. Go for it with a spade. But yeah, thanks, Charlie. It is really important, and it's something that I do maybe once every 1 to 2 months. It's not an every week thing like weeding, is it?
Even
Make
just
sure
once
you
a year
make
will
sure you
make
do it
a
when the
really.
ground's wet as well. That's the big one. I see people suffering in the summer, like
Yeah,
digging through some clay. You do it after a rainy day, and it's like butter.
yeah. And there is educational videos on basically all of these topics on our members area. That's either shot with myself, Charles Dowding, or two other growing experts. So like if you want to know the details of what we're talking about in all of this and how to do things, then jump on a members area, check out these videos, or come along to a workshop with these guys in person. But yeah, moving on, harvesting, a really
Harvesting.
essential one.
Yeah, this it's really good to get to know your plants and to know what the markers are for when the plant is ready to harvest. For example, potatoes, after they've flowered, that's then a good time to harvest them. It's also good to know if your plant can be cut and come again, like chard, for instance, kale, if your salads, what type of salad are you growing? Is it going to come to a head, or is it cut and come again? You can pick the leaves off. But yeah, all of this is learning along the way. Also, I think when I was at Charles's place, I was harvesting the leeks. And he kind of pulls it out the ground just a tiny bit, and then with his knife chops off the roots and leaves the roots of the plants in the ground.
Yeah,
And then you're leaving organic matter in the ground, which is adding more nutrients to the soil. Yeah, I'd been doing that wrong for a little while. But yeah, key there is minimal soil disturbance.
definitely,
Should be a
definitely.
mantra.
Any root that you can leave in the soil that's going to decompose into a track for a worm to live in, to then put its
Yeah,
worm
leave it
paths
in.
in, and then that's going to fertilize your ground. The microbes are going to live in there. They're going to move in. It's like it's a
Yeah,
no-brainer. Just leave them in. They decompose, and then you can plant over the top.
yeah. And knowing what part of your plant to harvest, with chard, you're pulling the leaves from the outside, and most plants, you're pulling the leaves from the outside.
Yeah,
And then I also wanted to mention eating your whole plant, because you carrot tops, for instance, they're like a really nutritious herb, like really rich in vitamin C, but not many people know you can eat them. Same with beetroots. Also, you can make kimchi and sauerkraut and things like that from the leaves from all your brassicas. They're all edible.
yeah.
Um,
On this picture, we've also got the Brussels sprout top as well, which is pretty nice.
yeah,
You can sort of chuck a bit of oil on that and some maybe
yeah,
garlic, bit of salt, and bit of soy sauce. Put that in the oven, and that'll crisp up and go a bit like
yeah, yeah.
Chinese
Usually, if one
takeaway
part of
chili.
your plant is edible, the rest is.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, it's really a case of just getting to know when your plants are ready. Is your tomato ripe, or is it getting nibbled? Maybe it's not quite ripe, but you can take it home and ripen it on your window ledge.
Yeah. And if you're
Um,
out, just nibble it and see what it tastes like, right?
yeah,
Don't
absolutely,
hesitate to try. It's you've got a living larder on your patch, and it's a
absolutely.
to taste.
That's it.
Yeah, love that. On to watering. So yeah, we have briefly touched on watering. I think when we spoke about beginners getting into no dig, there is that risk of overwatering. If you want to check the soil to know whether you want to water, literally stick your fingers in it. If you get up to about there and it's totally dry, then you probably need to water. If you get to there and it's wet, then don't water at all. The roots of plants will forage for water, and they'll be fine. You can hope for a bit of rainfall. We always prefer rainfall over using mains water. So if you're checking the weather and you know that it's actually raining fairly consistently on and off, then you probably don't need to come and water because nature's doing the job for you. I'd noticed that the change in growth between rainwater and tap water, it is actually visible when you're on a site and you're looking at your plants. Um, yeah, things to check for if the leaves are really floppy, maybe if they're not yellowing, but if you've got a lettuce and it just looks like a really sad lettuce, then it probably needs some water, otherwise it's going to go to bolt. And then if you are doing plug plants, then when you put your plugs in, what Charles recommends is you give them a sprinkle every 2 to 3 days for the first 7 days, and then they should be established enough to benefit from natural rainwater or a fairly irregular watering from yourself, unless you're growing something like celery or celeriac, which does require quite a high level of water input. Um, I think, yeah, when you're using the watering can, always make sure that if you're taking it out with a rose, you're bringing it back in with a rose on the allotment site. And then if you're watering seedlings, then use the rose to make it a bit more delicate for them. But if you had like a pre-established Brussels sprout plant like that and you thought, oh, I actually need to water it, I don't know why you would at this time of year, but you can take the rose off and just water directly at the base of the plant, and then you're not spreading water out and wasting it. It's quite precious resource. So yeah, I think when we first started Roots, it was 2022. We had a 4 month, 5 month dry spell across that growing season. I still only watered maybe 2, 3 times a month during that. The retention in the water of the no dig bed was just incredible, and I still harvested loads and loads of produce off the back of it. So yeah, um, that's probably it for me on watering. Willem, are you going to handle the 1 inch compost?
Yeah, no, so I think the thing is that kind of has to be said about this is really what we were saying about water, what we were saying about fertilizer. Is always it's too much of a good thing is bad. You really only need, like, if you're on a virgin site and you've got a brand new patch, that's gonna have plenty of compost. It's gonna have 4 5 inches of compost or whatever. Like, there's going to be a good amount of it. So don't stress it too much. But if you have been growing, think about all of the stuff you've got out your patch. Just think about that and put that back on, because it's really what we're trying to do is we're trying to maintain a healthy microbiome. We're trying to feed our soil in the same way that obviously our plants are feeding us. So you've got to treat it like a pet. You know what I mean? Like, show it a bit of love. And that might mean you getting up and smelling it or whatever, sticking your fingers in it. But what you don't do with pets as well is you don't overfeed them. So don't go bananas with putting, I've seen some people do on top of their existing 4 inches, they'll whack another 4 inches on, and it's too fertile. It's a waste, and it's bloody hard work. Well, that has been said, like, this is the time of year to really be doing it. We actually do it as well. Like, we actually offer that to people. Like, if you're thinking over, feeling a bit overwhelmed by the prospect of wheeling so many barrows down to your patch, we literally do that. And it's such a simple thing to just give your bed the actual best chance for success. It's one of the times where you've got a lot more control over your plot, is when you're at the opportunity to then top it up. So do it right, and don't do it, too much.
And if you only need 1 inch, then you can figure out ways of how do I create this compost per year out of the green waste that's coming from my patch. So
Exactly, and that could be, thinking about green manures, or thinking about using your own compost. But, like, it's a lot of it is just, really being reflective over what have you taken out of your soil, what can you give it. That could be with, when you're doing your yearly top up, put a bit of seaweed on it, or biochar or something. You know what I mean?
biochar,
Like,
yeah.
awesome things that really give that, the microbiome of the soil right kick up the backside.
That's what we want. Yeah,
Mm.
so go for it. And I think the biggest thing for a beginner to take away is that if you do take a patch of us, it doesn't look like it's had much of a compost top up by the last person, then feel free to do it no matter what time of year it is. If it's like bare soil, then you probably want 3 or 4 inches on there, and then you start your 1 inch rotation year on year. But it depends what you start with. So take that into account, definitely. And then yeah, we're literally this is our last one. Cover crops. That is actually a photo of the patch that I took on next to me with a cover crop of green mustard on. But Jazzy, you're taking this one away.
Yeah, we've mentioned cover crops quite a few times. Essentially you're growing a crop like green mustard or something over your patch, and it's a green manure or a cover crop. It's got different names, and it's a living compost that you're growing. You're keeping the life in your soil. You're growing up this plant. It's keeping the root structure. I was always told that bare soil is dead soil. Like always keeping plants in your soil means that you haven't got weeds growing through. You're locking all the nutrients in. You're not getting the soil erosion. So you're growing these little tiny mustards, for example, in your bed, and then you would chop and drop them, or the frost would take them and let them break down. And I see a lot of people on the site not quite getting the concept of it and ripping it all out the soil and going and sticking it on the compost heap. I'm like, no, it's the most important part about it is letting it break down straight into your soil. It's a living organic compost essentially, or fertilizer, and you want that to break down. So it's a great thing to do if you have got that spare patch on your bed, or you're not ready to grow there yet, or you've grown something really intense, like I know Ed's not into crop rotation too much, but say like your brassicas are really heavy feeders. It's really great to grow your beans there, or a nitrogen fixer of some sort in that area of plot, to give that bed a rest and to get the nutrients back into the soil again afterwards. Yeah.
And just to note, like on here, this was a green mustard because I took it on. It was bare soil, and I thought I've only got time to put garlic in this front bit. So then now that we're about midway through the winter, this green mustard has actually started to die off from frost. So the frost is doing the job. I don't have to chop and drop it. I don't have to cover it. But if you got to spring and well, maybe if you got to end of next month and your green mustard looked like this, if not taller, then you might want to squash it and then put some sort of black plastic cover over it to kill it so it's ready for March for you to plant into. So with cover crops, just yeah, understand the cover crop that you're using, understand whether nature can do the decomposing for you, and then plan accordingly if you need to. But yeah, thank you so much everyone for hanging on in there. We've got 88 people still here. That's unbelievable.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Troopers.
Wow.
We will do Q&As. Please send us the Q&As. We'll get back to you in writing. I think it's quite late to keep everyone tonight. But when we circulate this, we've also included a list of books, seeds, growers, and films to watch, and also a link to where you can get your equipment from. I'm missing a couple of links, but I'll make sure that they're definitely in there for when we send around this PDF to everyone who's attended. We've also recorded this meeting, so we'll probably be putting it on YouTube and see what people think about the stuff we've got to say. And so thank you for being part of it. And we'll also circulate that recording. So if you do want to watch it again, please go for it. But yeah, thanks for joining us. And thank you, Willem, Charlie, Jazz, and Nat as well. Nat had to dip off just then. She's got parent things to do. But yeah, it's been absolutely wonderful. We'll be sending around a little feedback form. It's really interesting to see where our knowledge connects and whether what we're talking about does help you as a beginner. If it doesn't help you as a beginner, we want to know about it and we want to adapt the way that we're communicating out to everyone. So we do make sure that you guys are getting exactly what you need. So please give us open, honest feedback. We're all ears and we just want you to have the best growing journey that you can possibly have with Roots Allotments. So yeah,
Yes.
I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Oh, well done,
Well,
Ed.
blimey. Yeah, well
That
done,
was
Ed.
awesome.
Yeah, well
I
done.
just want to let everyone know the biggest takeaway from that is just don't get overwhelmed by all the mad info that we've given you. If you're a new grower, to go forth and have a go and see what happens, and don't get dumbed down and just really enjoy it. There's nothing
Definitely.
you can learn more than just having a go at it.
Mm.
I'm just reading through some of the Q&As now. Thank you so much. Really positive stuff coming in. Yeah, beautiful stuff. So yeah, just keep an eye out for the emails and we'll be in touch and we'll we'll see you down the allotment sites, everyone. It was really lovely to get everyone together for this, and I'm sure we'll get together. We'll think about how we can do more of these throughout the season. And
I was going to say it's probably the first of many, I imagine, of sort of
Yeah,
things like this, which will be
definitely.
lush, which will be lush.
It will be. It'll be great. And you guys everyone from different allotment sites gets to see our amazing patch managers who are working at each location and galvanizing their community. So thank you so much for being part of it, everyone. I really appreciate it. So yeah, I'm gonna peace
Yeah.
out. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
lovely
Right.
Bye, guys.
Peace,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
See you later. Bye bye.
Thank you, Kate.